It's a project of gargantuan proportions, spanning 1,300 kilometers across 3 countries. The Lobito Corridor railway project is set, is set to revolutionize mining logistics in the central and southern African regions. The corridor is designed to efficiently transport critical minerals from the Copperbelt region of the DRC and Zambia to the port of Lobito in Angola for export to global markets. So how do we ensure that the Lobito Corridor project remains on track and benefits those living in the region? How does it benefit Angola? And what does this project mean for the global supply of critical minerals? Hello and welcome to this webinar on the Lobito Corridor, a game changer for the African mining sector. My name is Gerard Peter. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Mining Review Africa, and I'm your moderator for today. This webinar is brought to you in collaboration with the Angolan International Mining Conference, which takes place in October. More details on the conference will be shared at the end of this webinar. Today, we will discuss the development of the Lobito Corridor, the benefit it brings to the region, and also address some of the challenges and concerns that could potentially derail the project. To unpack these topics, I'm joined by an esteemed panel, all of whom are experts in their field. Our panelists are Zach Hartwanger, Senior Commercial Development, Africa of Open Mineral, Nuno Chavez Frota, Chief Legal and Compliance Officer of Lobito Atlantic Railway, Alex Pickard, Executive Vice President of Corporate Development and Investor Relations of Ivanhoe Mines, and Dr. Theo Achiampong, Head of Research and Markets at Critical Minerals Africa Group. Thank you all for joining us today. Now, a reminder to our audience that you can also be part of the conversation. If you have a question for any one of our panelists, simply pop it into the comments box on the right-hand side of your screen. Before we start the discussion, I'd like to play a short video to give you an overview of the Lobito Corridor.
Is an over 1,300 kilometer railway link from the port of Lobito in Angola, crossing the Democratic Republic of Congo to the Copperbelt region in northwestern Zambia. This first ever open access transcontinental rail corridor in Africa opens up export access for landlocked mining regions via an Atlantic seaport. Traversing a region with some of the world's richest cobalt and copper reserves, the corridor is key for renewable energy and EV supply chains. Over 50% of global cobalt and substantial copper reserves lie in the DRC's Copperbelt and Katanga region. It has the capacity to reduce shipping times by up to 10 to 15 days, significantly cut costs, and reduce reliance on longer southern routes. The corridor's cost is estimated around $10 billion, with scope stretching to roads, bridges, energy, and telecommunication. Phase 1 of the project includes refurbishing the existing 1,300 kilometer line between Lobito and Luau near the DRC border. Phase 2 adds roughly 800 kilometers of new tracks eastward from Angola into Zambia's Copperbelt. There are proposals to extend even further east through Tanzania, potentially linking the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. The DRC's President Felix Tshisekedi forecasts creation of over 30,000 direct and indirect jobs, reduced transit time to under 10 days, plus broader regional integration and poverty reduction. Beyond mining, investments in port modernization, agribusiness, logistics, renewable energy, and training are helping diversify economic benefits and strengthen local capacity.
There's always one person that's on mute, and this time it was me. So before we can start off our discussion right now, and I want to start with you, Zach. Why is the development of the Lobito Corridor so important to the global demand for critical minerals?
Good afternoon, Gerard, panelists, and to your and to the rest of the audience. So, I mean, as it mentioned in the intro video, a vast bulk of the critical minerals is coming from this region. I mean, cobalt, copper from DRC, as well as quite a significant amount from Zambia. And at the moment, the existing logistic routes are to truck it to the existing ports. And then through that process, there's often a lot of delays going across various borders, congestion at port. So with the development of this Lobito corridor, it's really going to open up a new channel, also with on a rail, so to avoid trucking delays going through various regions and ultimately ensure a steadier supply of critical minerals to the rest of the globe.
Okay. Alex, I'd like to bring you into the conversation here. Talk about the importance of this project to the region's mining sector.
Yeah, thank you, Gerard, for the question, and thank you for having us for this this discussion today. So, look, I think Zach touched on it very well. For the mining sector, this project has huge importance. At Ivanhoe Mines, just to kind of provide a bit of context, we are one of the largest exporters from the DRC. We have two projects: the Kamoa-Kakula copper mine, which produces over 500,000 tons of copper at steady state, which translates to over 1 million tons of copper concentrate. And then also the Kipushi mine, which is the largest zinc mine in Africa by far, which will soon be producing about 300,000 tons of zinc, which again is over 600,000 tons of concentrate. And by far the most costly part of the entire business of operating and mining in the DRC and elsewhere in the Central African Copper Belt is the business of logistics. So at Kamoa-Kakula, roughly 1/3 of our overall operating cost is logistics. At Kipushi, that's actually even higher because zinc is a slightly less valuable product than copper. It's half of our operating cost is simply logistics. And that's really when you take into consideration the scale of what's involved, which is moving copper concentrates, which are a bulk material, in tens of tons. And currently the options are that you go to Durban, which is 3,000 kilometers by road, or you go to Dar es Salaam, which is 2,500 kilometers by road. So the opportunity that the Lobito corridor brings is to halve that distance, but not only halving that distance, moving material by rail is inherently incredibly efficient when compared with moving material by truck, and all of the issues that Zach mentioned in terms of delays and the unpredictability of moving material by truck versus by rail. And then finally, the last point I would just add is, clearly, from a carbon intensity point of view, at Ivanhoe Mines, we like to think that we mine the materials that the modern world needs for electrification and for the shift away from fossil fuels, and we mine them in the right way. But it feels slightly contradictory that we take those materials from the DRC and we put them on a truck, and we send that truck for 2,500 kilometers, and it's actually the biggest single source of emissions in the overall value chain of what we do at Ivanhoe Mines. So the rail is also a fantastic opportunity to reduce the emissions footprint of the mining sector in the DRC and surrounding countries. You're just on mute, Gerard.
We are facing a few technical issues, so we are working to fix that. Nuno, if I can bring you in here, please. Give us an overview of the Lobito Atlantic Railway. When was it formed, and what role does it play in the actual project?
Thanks, Gerard, and hi to everyone who joined. So, Lobito Atlantic Railway is an operational company. It was set up as a result of an international tender that was conducted by the Ministry of Transport via its Department of Concessions in Angola and for Angola. And it aimed at monetizing and turning the CFB, the Benguela Railway, into one of the best, most efficient and operational link route that would make it possible for the shortest transport of critical minerals from both DRC, but also Zambia, and also in Angola, all the way to the mining port of Lobito in Benguela, in the Bengali province. So we were set up as a result of that tender, and after winning that tender, in order to basically making it possible, which is today a reality. Note, and for context purposes, that we are in operations since January 2024. We had since November 2022, from the incorporation of Lobito Atlantic Railway in Angola, time to put our things together, so to speak. And we are now conducting business with the aim to not only increase our capacity, which takes time, and we can dive into that later in this conversation. But at this point, we are fully operational with the means and the equipment and the people that we have retained to assist us from an operational standpoint.
Okay. Can you all still hear me? Can you all still hear me? Yeah. I think there's a bit of a technical issue on my side. Theo, let's step away from mining for a minute. What are some of the socio-economic benefits that the Lobito Corridor will bring to the region?
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter, and it's good to see you and everyone else on the call. I think beside mining, there are huge opportunities that the corridor does offer to the countries and the people that are therein. So, I mean, the first point which the other panelists have made really is around cheaper and faster market access, that you're able to cut down on cost, you're able to cut down on time, and then in a sense, you can also then improve on your export competitiveness for these mineral products that are being channeled through the railway line. But beyond that, there are tremendous opportunities in terms of jobs and skills that would be coming along the corridor. So if you look at both direct and indirect jobs, at least during the construction phase, you would need people that would be working, artisans, you would need engineers, you would need local people to be providing food and other related services. And then when the railway is actually running itself, the rail operations, the terminals, the logistics, and also the related agro-processing and light manufacturing opportunities becomes extremely important in terms of the diversification opportunities for the three countries that are along the corridor. And for me, I think the latter bit even becomes much more important, especially when you're talking about us wanting these countries to diversify away from the mining sector, that you have an opportunity to really deepen industrialization with the agro processing and the light manufacturing sector. I also think related to that really is the issue of creating other industrial hubs or clusters through the provision of the corridor. You can actually create other related renewable energy value chains, and that's actually part of the proposal, where they're creating I think as much as 500 megawatts of solar energy potential to drive some of these agro processing zones and support SMEs and regional trade. And then lastly, I think really the other value out of all of this corridor from a socioeconomic perspective is how this helps deepen regional integration. So related to that is a number of the trade reforms or trade facilitation reforms that are taking place to help improve cross-border business for those companies and operations that would take place along the three countries within the corridor.
Thanks for that, Dia. I'm really, really struggling today. Apologies to both the panelists and to the audience as well. I want to touch on what Alex said, and Zach, I'd like to bring you in on this. Let's look at the more traditional routes like Dar es Salaam and Durban. What does the establishment of the Lobito Corridor mean for these two important ports in Africa?
Yeah, so I think the bulk of the commodities are shipped out of those two ports. There are a couple others, but the majority of the material flows out of there, and as well as the equipment coming in to service the mining industry and many other projects across the continent. So the incorporation of the Lobito corridor on the export channels would reduce the congestion at the port, which I think is vital. We've had some instances of demurrage through open mineral where it ends up being quite a significant cost factor, as Alex said, to the overall sustaining costs of moving material. With that said, I think that on the advantage side, it would ensure that the existing ports improve their operations, so that they can compete overall with the kind of reduced transit time to get it to the port. They would have to increase their efficiencies and thereby reduce their cost basis, and hopefully that could be reflected on the end sellable value of this material to the rest of the world.
Okay. Nuno, can you tell me how is the Lobito Atlantic Railway concession being funded?
Well, so to this date, Gerard, the funding is self-funding scheme. So the shareholders, the main shareholders, Martin Gilles, which is a large civil works / construction company, as well as Trafigura, who is a major miner, major commodity trader, have been self-funding this project. We are currently in discussions. We have been for a long time, and we hope to close this year with the likes of the Development Finance Corporation and so on. We expect to close, as I said, this year, which basically will allow us to focus on infrastructure investment across the line. At this point, it's fully self-funded.
Okay. Are you expecting any investment from the governments for the Lobito project?
We are not expecting investments from any government. So Lobito Atlantic Railway is a commercial company, fully owned by its shareholders, and so the finance we are seeking and we are discussing and we hope to close by before the end of this year aims strictly at infrastructure enhancing for the rail without the involvement from any states, any surrounding regional states.
Okay, thank you for that. Alex, I want to come back to you. Now, last year, Ivanhoe Mines signed a 5-year township agreement to use the Lobito corridor to transport copper. Can you give us an update on how this is progressing?
Yeah, so it was actually our subsidiary Kamoa Copper that signed the agreement with Lobito. But really, the agreement is a reserved capacity agreement framed around a volume of 120 to 240,000 tons of material. That could be copper in concentrate, that could be copper anodes, that we intend to send via the Lobito Corridor for a period of 5 years. So far it's been going very well. Obviously the corridor is in ramp up, and I think Kamoa has been contributing roughly 50% of the overall volumes. So this year we expect it to be somewhere around 50,000 tons. And as far as I understand, and Nuno will have the facts to hand, there is an intention to ramp the corridor up very soon to over 500,000 tons of capacity and ultimately over 1 million tons of capacity by the turn of the decade, and we intend to be one of the major customers for that effort. And I think we play an important role, going back to the questioning of financing, by sort of underpinning the work that Nuno and Lobito are doing, by being a reliable customer for that corridor.
Great stuff. Thank you. Nuno, coming back to you. Now, the concession traverses many countries. How do you ensure that you're compliant with all rail legislation in these countries?
Well, that's a really important question. And for me, sitting as Chief Legal and Compliance Officer, this has been, since I joined, one of the main challenges. So Lobito Atlantic Railway is only active per se in the Angolan territory. Okay, and the reason for that is because the company is a company that has a concession in Angola. So there's no cross-border legal structure per se, so that law is active outside the borders. What we have is technical arrangements and agreements, and I would focus on the RC because, as I had mentioned in different forums, we are not active in relation to Zambia. We do not have a concession. So Lobito Atlantic Railway was built on the basis of two concessions, just out of clarity. One related to the mining port of Lobito, the other one related to the rail. There are two separate concessions and therefore contractual arrangements with different parties involved. So refocusing on the rail aspect and the compliance. Since I joined in February 2024, we had time to put together a really thorough compliance program in Angola that was designed to take on board not only the regulations that are applicable in Angola to the sector, but anything that we understood from an international experience that was brought in not only by Motengil, but also from Trafigura as a commodities specialist in the global markets. And we modeled our regulations internally, our policies, compliance, and both compliance and safety on the basis of the experience gathered. By doing that, we were able to apply the best practices to our environment. And the way we look at every one of our shipments that crosses the border is to make sure that our counterparties on the other side look at it in the same way, and there's a full alignment in terms of compliance. We do bear an obligation, but we are not present. For instance, in Congo, law does not exist. We have a different setup, which we can discuss preliminary in this webinar. But so, in a nutshell, we have now a full set of policies internally for law that are fully implemented. I am currently preparing my travel and my team's travel to go to Mushiko, which is quite far away from Benguela, for another roughly 150 of our operational people's training that is conducted by me and my team, also on policies, safety, and governance and compliance in general. So as you can see, This is a regular daily effort from the team and from Lobito Atlantic to make sure that we are fully respecting not only the regulations in place in Angola, but also what was designed with the help of our sponsors, of our shareholders, and currently implemented.
Okay. Now, Nuno, a question has come in from our audience, and I'd like to ask you this. Who is responsible for the maintenance of the railway and for how long?
So the way we were set up was based on reliability, which is a word that has been used in this webinar before. Safety and reliability is what we count on in such an environment with such assets. The maintenance entity is actually Mota-Engil. The reason for that is not only because they are one of our shareholders and therefore interested parties or interested party, but also because they have a proven record that is undeniable, which makes this consortium as reputable as it can be at the eyes of our clients, such as one present here today. And therefore, I think that when you look at Mota-Engil, there is no questions about how the maintenance is conducted, which is, as I said, fundamental for us to work properly in a very difficult environment and challenging environment from a rail perspective.
Okay. Theo, if I can turn my attention to you now, talk to me about how will the Lobito Corridor project help to attract foreign investment into the African mining sector?
Yes, I think definitely would be a big catalyst, and already we're seeing that in relation to some of the points that both Nino and Alex have made, where you already have some anchor customers to really make the economics of the whole railway line, work. And then on top of that, we already also have seen additional commitment from various multinational and bilateral entities, so like the US DFC, and then the African Development Bank, and then the EU and others, all pitching in a little bit of money to support various aspects of the corridor, including some of the technical studies that are needed to prove certain viability chains. But I also think beyond that, in terms of attracting investment, this corridor opens up the opportunity for further value addition beyond just the export of the raw, the bulk minerals. So particularly things to do with the refining, and then also making some of the precursor cells, right, for global market, as well as for use in within the continent, becomes really, really important. And that, of course, the economics of that has to be proven in terms of what this could do. But I definitely think that having this new corridor and with the level of commitment behind it in terms of financing, and then also the private sector players, within that, really opens up a huge opportunity to think beyond just the extraction, or what some will call the mine to sort of port model, to think about further value addition within the mining chain, and then outward of that, some of the opportunities in renewable energy as well as agriculture to help diversification.
Okay. Zach, let's talk about geopolitical conditions. What impact will the Lobito Corridor have on China's involvement in infrastructure development in Africa?
So great question. I think that's a hot topic kind of everywhere at the moment when it comes to geopolitics. So obviously the situation of Lobito and it connecting that Central Africa region to the Atlantic, we expect that it's going to service mostly the Western world. However, I would imagine that there are quite a few Chinese-owned and operated mines in the region, and when there are kind of backlogs or congestion at port, we do expect some Chinese material flows to go through the corridor. But having said that, with the Lobito corridor coming online, we would expect that the Chinese would increase their investment into existing corridors, existing trade routes, trying to get them to be more efficient, fix the roads, perhaps even investment into some of the ports, to increase their load capacities, etc. And ultimately, provide better financing terms for companies that are operating in those regions.
Okay, great stuff. Now, just a reminder to our audience that if you have any questions, please pop them into the comment box and we will get one of our panelists to answer them for you. Now, we've spoken a lot about, the opportunities and the benefits that this immense project will bring to the region. But let's talk about some of the challenges of developing this important logistics project. And I want to start with you, Nuno. You've been tasked with the rehabilitation and improvement of existing infrastructure and rolling stock. What are some of the challenges in this regard, and how have you overcome them?
Indeed, this is a project full of surprises. And we at Lobito Atlantic, when we incorporated this company, and when I joined, it was clear that such a young company, even if the sponsors, the shareholders are big players in the market, in the African market, the truth is that we had to crystallize an identity, because we are effectively an operational company. We manage and the trains. We manage a terminal, an exclusive purpose terminal, mining purpose terminal. And we had to overcome challenges that we faced immediately by crystallizing a culture of safety and security. So when you are involved in the operations of a rail such as this one, as you mentioned in the introduction, over 1,289 kilometers, roughly that length. The truth is that if you don't invest in infrastructure with the aim of turning the line more efficient, while preserving safety and security, you have failed in this project. And so the main challenge is to do everything at the same time. We've been able to cope with that, but it's a really enormous effort from all the teams involved. We have today just under 1,000 employees. It's true that we did not hire 1,000 employees from day to night in 1 year, 1 year and a half. We have inherited employees from both CFB, the Bengala Railway, as well as from the EPL, the Port of Lobito. And by inheriting, it doesn't mean that we didn't have to provide these employees with a new culture, company culture. And as I mentioned before, it was important for us to focus on safety and security. And so all this work has been done, but it's not something that you close the door immediately after you provided the trainings. As I said, it needs to be crystallized. We're doing it. But also, in terms of the main challenges, as I mentioned before, for us to be efficient, there's a lot of ingredients that need to be put on. We need the finance to make sure that the right investments in infrastructure and increase of reliable new rolling stock is done. So with that, we'll be able to increase capacity. And with the increased capacity that we expect, we'll be able to focus on efficiency. And by efficiency, I mean cycle times, as well as transit times. And altogether, with all these ingredients together, we will be able to have an optimized railway with clients that are satisfied. In a nutshell, this is the answer. But let me tell you one thing that is important. So there is a difference between what the Lobito Corridor is and what Lobito Atlantic Railway is. Lobito Atlantic Railway is an SPV. It's a special purpose vehicle created for the purpose of monetizing assets that were granted under a concession agreement. That's the definition. And so we need to overcome these challenges that I referred to in order to effectively monetize and pay our royalties, for instance, to our grantor, which is the Ministry of Transport. In a nutshell, this is the answer I can provide you today.
Great, sir. Thank you for that. Now, Theo, there's been concerns raised about the impact of this project on various aspects, such as the displacement of people, health impact, and also a negative impact on the environment. Can you elaborate on some of these challenges, and can they be truly overcome?
Yes, definitely could be overcome. Like any other big ticket infrastructure projects, there would be issues in relation to livelihoods, in relation to public health, and the sort of broader security and governance related challenges. But we have seen evidence both on this project and in other big ticket infrastructure projects across the continent where the developers have taken proactive steps to try and mitigate these issues through their ESIA kind of processes, ensuring that you have free, prior informed consent, those that are displaced are remunerated appropriately, and then you have some grievance mechanisms available for people to iron out their concerns and not just dismiss them, as can be sometimes with projects that we had seen in the past. And I think also related to this is the whole idea that you also have adequate third-party reporting, mechanisms, and the fact that you do have these relatively big ticket infrastructure players and even the end contractors. So, for example, Alex from Ivanhoe, they're going to insist that the right things, are done. And I am relatively, comfortable that in terms of the key, call it ESG issues, the environmental and social governance issues, there are proactive attempts to try and address these. That is not to say that there would not be issues. For sure, there would be, but there are mechanisms around to try and address them and ensure that this really, at the end of the day, the corridor creates viable opportunities, not just for the businesses, but for the communities, for the households in there to actually have a job, to transform those economies and help the countries, at large. So I really think that, yes, those concerns legitimate, but there are mechanisms within the current processes and systems to try and address them.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Theo. Alex, I want to bring you in on the conversation here, and this is a question from an audience member. And the question is, how much of critical minerals that were previously considered unfeasible are now feasible because of the Lobito Corridor?
It's a challenging question to answer, Gerard, primarily because we don't know today, I think, what the full cost benefits of the Lobito Corridor is. So, over time, I certainly anticipate that the Lobito Corridor, when it reaches its full capacity and when the import volumes are matched with export volumes, will lead to a significant reduction in underlying costs. And I believe that the costs of trucking to Durban or elsewhere are currently, inflated because of congestion and because of waiting times and so on. But how much that cost will reduce, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, I think we can all speculate, but we don't know an exact number. But perhaps just to come at the question from another angle, what I do believe very firmly is that the economic reserves of places like the DRC, and when I talk about economic reserves, we're talking about, the endowment of physical copper or zinc or lithium or whatever we're talking about in the ground, but also we're applying prevailing commodity prices, and we're applying cost factors that will dictate what the economic reserves that can actually be extracted profitably. Those reserves are certainly going to increase because of the Lobito Corridor. And there are certainly projects today where, you might have a project in the Katanga province that has a grade of, let's say, 0.4% copper, and that is not economically extractable today in the DRC because of this logistics issue. It might be extractable in elsewhere in the world because you can do it on a much greater scale with greater cost efficiencies. But there will be a marginal cutoff point where projects will all of a sudden become viable because of the Lobito Corridor. But I can't sort of hazard a guess at is that 20% or 30% or 40% today. It really comes down to how much cost saving is achieved over time. And I also think that the cost savings achieved at Lobito, and I think this point was sort of made earlier, will lead to an improvement in efficiencies at the other options as well, whether that's Durban, Dar es Salaam, further investments in rail and infrastructure regionally. So in a rising tide, all the boats will be lifted.
Great. Thank you for answering that, Alex, to the best of your ability. Zach, another audience question that's come in. Now, we've spoken about China's involvement in Africa, but talk to me about the involvement of the US and the EU in the Lobito Corridor project, and why is this so important for these two entities?
Yeah, so I think also a very, very good question. And I think Nuno could probably elaborate on that a bit further. But I think just going back to the geographic location and the serviceability to get the material from the copper belts and DRC, etc., through to a port on the Atlantic in a safe manner, in a cost-effective manner, which would then be the logical shipping route to get them to those geographies, as opposed to their current flows where it's going pretty much to Dar es Salaam and to Durban, as we mentioned, and then have a more significant shipping journey, which of course adds to the cost and the cost of carry effectively of the material, making it more expensive by the time it gets to the destination. So there is really an incentive for the Western world to bring this project to fruition, ensure a steady flow of affordable critical minerals to those geographies.
Okay, understood. Nuno, another question that's coming from our audience, and they would like to know, what are some of the notable successes that have been achieved thus far regarding the transportation of minerals by Lobito Atlantic Railway?
Well, I think we are clearly increasing capacity. We've ordered and paid for rolling stock that came from abroad. We are now aiming at 1 train a day. We hope within the next 5 years to reach such efficiency and capacity that we'll be able to do 6 trains a day. As you know, and as it was mentioned before, this is a really long route. Our success and what we've achieved today is a result of 1.5 years of work, which is really minimal in terms of the length and the period. I think if we do a webinar next year, I am pretty sure that we will come up with new numbers. This is why as some of us know, we had also a governance reshuffle very recently, and we are now in full motion with what we call LAR 2.0. We started with LAR 1.0 with an initial setup in terms of governance. We are today acting under the same board of directors, but with an executive management team and executive committee, with a new CEO. We are respecting our agreements with our suppliers in terms of rolling stock, so that we can achieve the results we want in terms of capacity, as I mentioned, and this is also a milestone. We have received in the last 2 months 3 vessels, one of them with our sulfur cargo that has been now transported to DRC, to the mines. And so we are one step at a time by doing the right things, respecting not only the communities that were referred, but also the safety that we need to input to our line, overcoming our challenges, and by doing that, we are achieving success. Some of these successes are small, but not compared to what happened a few years ago with a different setup and without LAR involvement.
Right, sir. Thank you very much for that, Nuno. Zach, I want to come back to you. And in your view, how do we ensure that this project is developed without delays caused by governments, political uncertainty? I mean, look, in 2027, there's the Zambian elections, so that might play a role. There's also corruption legislation. So how do we get it all right to ensure that this project can develop on time and benefit the region?
So I think these kind of delays and risks are inherent across Africa. So it's really a case of how they can be mitigated. I think Nuno and the team, and their kind of active involvement as independent governance will play a very important role in that. From the project development side of things, following the traditional method of going out to public tender, perhaps for the subcontracting parts of the development stages, getting public participation from that regard, and selecting tenders not only on a competitive bid, but on the basis that they can carry the phase of the project up until a certain point, and then issue payment orders where they then get paid for the work completed, as opposed to going out and dishing upfront payments, and then you have kind of issues with companies running out of money prior to the completion. And I also think a topic that was mentioned earlier, the cross-border framework, and ensuring the different regions throughout the corridor being aligned on outcomes, and just making sure that those are achieved all together.
Great, so thank you for that. Theo, if I can bring you into the conversation, obviously there are private companies that are part of this webinar discussion today and are on the panel. But the success of this project also depends heavily on partnerships with government and private entities. How do we ensure that we can work in harmony so that ultimately this project benefits communities in the regions that it traverses?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of piggyback on the point that Zach just made. I think it comes down to 2 things, governance and call it mutual understanding. And to that extent, at the governmental level, the joint mechanism that they've got to sort of address issues that come up with the project, and lessons from other big infrastructure projects on the continent. Sometimes you get one government on the other side of the border, being more proactive than the other, and that can become quite a challenge. But when you have a mechanism to address these issues, so issues of, for example, of harmonizing standards, issues of KPIs, so what do we count as success at the end of the day? Issues to deal with how the benefits of the project are shared in terms of even like job and employment quotas becomes really, really important in trying to make a broader collective, partnership work. And I think also maybe related to that is having some third party or independent means of monitoring what is happening beside what the official parties report and publish. And in that extent, the work of even academia and civil society and those in the third sector becomes really important in terms of keeping an eye on the development on the ground. And I think all of that collectively really would ensure that the communities, benefit at the end of the day. And I think lastly, just a little point to what Alex also mentioned earlier. If you look at the western side of the DRC, there are huge copper resources, not reserves, that are yet to be fully untapped. And so really the opportunity in terms of what this corridor presents for additional exploration and additional value addition in the western half of the DRC is quite significant. Yeah.
Okay. Nuno, there's another question that's come in for LAR from our audience. And the question says that while there are significant agribusiness opportunities, is LAR looking at transporting goods beyond minerals? If not, is the national carrier in Angola taking this up?
Well, Jared, that's a very good question. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I received a signed copy of a contract this morning that relates to transport of agri products. So, as I think that answers the question. But needless to say that we are focused on being able to assist major miners because that was the purpose when we incorporated. But as we increase capacity, we will be able to cope with demand. It has to do with demand. And we cannot forget that once you sign MOUs or contracts, and I sit in that position as chief legal, with my involvement in contracts and commercial activities, we need to respect our commitments. Either they are related to reserve capacity or engagements, commercial engagements with obligations of transport from us. And so, although, as I said, I just received a contract, an executed version of a contract to transport agri products, and this comes from a company that is largely known because it's the only company that is large enough in Benguela that is also financed by international financiers, and therefore we would probably all know who I'm talking about. I won't mention the company, but they are large enough to be able to produce enough for us to having capacity transport all their goods across not only Angola but eventually abroad as well. And let me just add this point because I think it's relevant also from an ESG perspective and what the purpose is effectively here. Although we were set up, as I said, to transport our commodities, the truth is that we aim at being a company recognized for its transformational purpose. We need to do that because the country, Angola, needs that to happen, but it goes even an extra mile it is in line with the principles that were designed by the African Trade Agreement, as well as what is the willingness of the African Union in relation to regional development. And so we have been created with a purpose, which is obviously commercial, but we are very conscious about our surroundings, about the impact we may have along the corridor, and in relation to exports and imports in Africa. And that's very, very important for us as well. It's part of our culture and DNA to make sure that happens, obviously, in a safe environment as well.
Great stuff. Thank you. And gentlemen, I can tell you that the questions are streaming in, but also at the same time, we are almost out of time. So what I'd like to do is just allow you, each one of you, to give a quick 2-minute closing remark on today's topic and also on the Lobito Corridor. And let's start with you, Alex.
Thanks, Gerard. The pressure's on. So look, I think when you look at the DRC and what's been achieved in the Copper Belt, and I like to think that Ivanhoe Mines has been a big part of this from an exploration and development point of view. You know, the amount of copper being produced and exported has more than doubled in the space of 5 short years. And we believe that the endowment potential is certainly there to more than double that copper production again. And you know, touching on what Theo said, there is a huge amount of potential in the western side of the DRC. We're also exploring in Angola and Zambia along a similar vein. But I think that the Lobito Corridor will be a crucial enabler for these projects and for continued investment in exploration and ultimately mine development, which is you know, one of the biggest sources of economic upliftment for the continent of Africa more broadly. So we're incredibly excited about the opportunity. You know, I think it's been a long time in the making, and I really congratulate the Lobito Consortium on what they've managed to achieve in 1.5 short years. And there's definitely hard yards ahead, but we're very much looking forward to it as a partner.
Thank you for that. Zach, your closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you guys, and thank you to the rest of the panelists. It's been very interesting to hear your sentiments. From us at Open Mineral, I mean, obviously physical traders, we see it as a very exciting opportunity to increase trade flows, as well as have a greater impact for the region, and ultimately to deliver material to customers in various parts of the geography, whether it be the raw materials or the beneficiated products, yeah, to the rest of the world in a fast, timely, and cost-effective manner.
Great stuff. Thank you for that. Theo, your closing remarks, please.
Yes, thank you, Gerard, and likewise, I think it's been a great conversation, and also for us at the Critical Minerals Africa Group, which is an industry body advocating for more projects and more value chain related opportunities on the continent. We really see the corridor as a potential game changer in terms of improving market access and cost, but creating jobs and skills, and further being an anchor to deepen industrialization and diversification within the countries that traverse the corridor. Some further work would, of course, have to be done in terms of addressing some of those community-related concerns and some of the broader ESG issues, but those definitely can be addressed or mitigated and create a value for all the respective, stakeholders. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Theo. And finally, coming to you, Nuno, for your closing remarks, please.
Well, I think most have already been said by both Alex, Zach, and Theo, and yourself. I also thank you, VUCA, and yourself, Gerald, for this webinar. It was indeed very interesting. Good to meet and discuss with clients, but also with people of interest and people with knowledge. I hope that the people who have attended this webinar understand that there is a strong commitment from LAR to make all this work. And with that, needless to say that it would have not been possible to get to this point if we didn't have the support from Angola and Angolan state and the Ministry of Transport, as well as our regulator, the ANTT. We work hand in hand on a regular basis, day to day, with these institutions and these people who respect and put an emphasis on this project. We are not isolated. We know Angola, but we want this project to be replicated so that everyone involved, both communities as well as stakeholders and shareholders, benefit from this project. We are very serious and committed, and the numbers will show what I'm saying without further comments. And so thank you very much, and I hope to see all of you in the conference end of October.
Great stuff. Thank you for that, Nuno. And just a reminder that today's webinar was brought to you in collaboration with the Angolan Mining Conference, the Angolan International Mining Conference, taking place in Luanda from the 22nd to the 23rd of October. The event is the premier platform for stakeholders involved in Angola's mining sector. This includes government officials, mining companies, investors, technology providers, and industry experts. The conference will focus on the country's evolving mining landscape, sector reforms, infrastructure development, and sustainable practices. All of this highlights Angola's strategic positioning in the global mining sector. For more information, you can visit angolaimc.com. I'll repeat that. It is angolaimc.com. Just thank you once again to our panelists, Dr. Theo Achiompong of the Critical Minerals Africa Group, Zach Hartvanger of Open Mineral, Nuno Chavez Frota of Lobito Atlantic Railway, and Alex Pickard of Ivanhoe Mines for their contribution to today's discussion. A special thank you to you, the audience, for joining us today. And remember, if you missed any part of this webinar, you can watch on demand at miningreview.com. Until next time, goodbye.